We would like to welcome everyone out this evening to our City Council session and would like to call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by having a spiritual thought. Pete, do you have one? While he's getting that up, after the spiritual thought, we're going to have a Pledge of Allegiance by Midas Fielder and Zizix Fielder as well. They will do that together. So our inspirational thought this evening is democracy must be built through open societies that share information. When there is information, there is enlightenment. When there is debate, there are solutions. Where there is no sharing of power, no rule of law, no accountability, there is abuse, corruption, subjugation, and indignation. Submitted by Amanda Villanari. So we thank her for that. And we'd now like the two young men to come forward. And I guess you get to stand on a chair.
Please rise. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
So we would like to go to the approval of the minutes from our meeting on May 23rd, 2017. Is there a motion?
Mayor, before that, I just wanted to confirm, Donna, we caught this before the meeting, but there were a couple updates. There was a vote that I had voted nay on that just needed to be corrected from yay to nay, but I think that's been fixed, correct? Okay.
With that notion, I move to approve the minutes.
There's a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, we would like to go to our upcoming events. On June the 28th, Middassy, the Neapolitan Pizza Company, while having a tasting event at 6:30 p.m. And then the following day, on the 29th at 11 a.m., there will be a ribbon cutting. I wanted to make mention that on July 13th, we will have a combined meeting of the Provo City Council and Orem City Council in Provo. And at that point in time, we will have a bus preview of the new Bus Rapid Transit bus that will be there outside the city center. On July 25th, we are told with certainty by Carl Hurst that we will have the ribbon cutting for our new splash pad. And we saw that today, and it's beautiful. So all of you who can attend, we'll give you more information, but that will be something pretty special. August the 15th is the primary election, and the canvass, when the final results will be read, will be on August the 29th. Also on August 29th is the Walker Sanderson Funeral Home 4th Annual Car Show from 4 to 8 p.m. at their funeral facility on 8th North. September the 13th through the 15th, we have the Utah League of Cities and Towns 2017 Annual Conference. November 7th, we have the general election, and November 21st, we have the canvass with the final results of that election. We would like to make note to anyone here and anyone that's listening through our live stream that you do need to get your votes in to the city or the county the day before. This is going to be done vote by mail, so it will be you'll be getting that in the mail, but we need to make sure that those are in on time and not coming in afterwards. So we would like to go on. We have a lot of commission openings. You could take a look at those. We're not filling any of those today, but we do want to make mention of those. Every 6 months, we appoint a new mayor pro tem, and we are putting forth the name of Councilmember Sam Lentz as the mayor pro tem from July 1st to December 31st, 2017. Is there a motion to move forward with that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? Okay. Sam, you're moving forward. We have a proclamation that we would like to read. This is Independence Week, and the proclamation reads accordingly. Whereas Independence Week provides a time to celebrate the independence of the member of the community of Orem City and the entrepreneurial spirit represented by our core of local independent businesses, and whereas the individual decisions every community member makes today affect the future of Orem City, and whereas Orem's local independent businesses help preserve the uniqueness of the community and give us a sense of place, and whereas Orem's core of independently owned businesses give back to this community in goods, services, time, and talent, and whereas the health of Orem's economy depends on our support of businesses owned by our friends and neighbors, whereas Orem's independent business owners and employees enrich community members' shopping experiences with their knowledge and passion. Therefore, as we celebrate Independence Week 2017, we acknowledge that the ability to choose the direction of Orem City lies within each of us. Now, therefore, I, Richard Frederick Brunch, Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, do hereby proclaim the week of July 1st through the 7th, 2017 as Independence Week in the City of Orem, and salute our community members and locally owned independent businesses who are integral to the unique flavor of Orem and honor their efforts to make Orem the place we want to live and work. Dated this 27th day of June 2017. Do we have a motion to accept this proclamation?
Go ahead, Brent.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Can you pass that to Donna, please? We now have a presentation by the Colonial Heritage Association. Janelle Pugmire is here to make that, and we would invite her to come forward. Your husband would be great to have.
Julie, you're here. Anybody else? Okay.
Anybody else you'd like to have join you would be welcome to do so.
I am. I'm going to hopefully not break this wonderful chair. I just want to pretend to be Jason Van.
Sure. So when you sit there, you need to push the red button so it pops up on your microphone there. You might all three want to do that.
He's going to do all the time.
I just want to introduce you. You probably don't know my husband, 8 years younger and much prettier than me. Daniel is our co-chairman with me, and Julie Seebach. We have been doing this for a decade. No stipends, no money, all volunteerism, and we have built it. So I just want you to know that we love what we do, and I'll start because I actually wrote this down so I don't get too giddy. Okay. So, Mayor Brunst, council members, and of course, Mr. Davidson, thank you for this opportunity to report to you and let us whet your appetite for the coming week's festivities as we bring another year of 3 wonderful events in one park and to you at one price, totally free. As I stand before you tonight, or sit, it is obvious that the rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. In fact, this year's event goes beyond anything the Colonial Heritage Festival has offered Orem and the Freedom Festival to date. First, as a synergistic park, there are 3 events, and we're all starting to kind of work together. Isn't that amazing? So I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Vernon Stout and Scott Swain, and they have asked me to do that. So first, we'd like to give a shout out to Scott and the Cries of Freedom, because this is their 10th anniversary in the park, and we'd like to celebrate that. And as you know, he has a very popular little musical called Cries of Freedom. And that event will also, in the big event, he's going to be featuring a big band on the sounds of Mississippi Mood at noon on Saturdays and Tuesday. On Monday at 11:30 is his annual naturalization program, this year featuring Gail Halverson. We all know Gail, and he's a good friend of ours. And he says his 96-year-old body will make it if he can. The rest of the days revolve around speeches from historic characters and other showings of Cries of Freedom, the Freedom Walk, Statue of Liberty, and a lot of the other things that we're very familiar with Scott. And he said, please come and enjoy the event. Now, I'm going to interject something here because I have the mic. And I'm not a reporter tonight, so I don't have to worry about quoting myself. But on Freedom Vehicles Military Outpost this year, they're focusing a lot on Vietnam. And I just have to say this, and I will cry. When I worked for the Deseret News a long time ago, I wrote a story about the trinkets that I found in a box from my youth and my teenagehood and college life. And I don't know if any of you had one, but I had a POW MIA bracelet, if you know what those were. Anybody remember those? I wore mine through high school and college and then ended up taking it off. Today, in an email to my office, I received word that Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, now Colonel Robert Wood of the Air Force, first MIA, then killed in action. His remains were found, and they, after 50 years, are being flown to Dover Air Force Base today. And they will be laid in Arlington Cemetery tomorrow, so his family will have a place to go and to honor him. That was my bracelet, and I've been waiting 50 years to hear about that. So when I talk about Vernon and his Freedom Vehicles, it's not just about a bunch of big green trucks with big wheels. There's a story behind that, any of you that understand that. The Freedom Vehicles Military Outpost will include 3 major new events for 2017 that will add educational experiences for all visitors. This year, Vernon Stout and crew will be teaching the registered participants how to be soldiers by going through a boot camp with a real drill sergeant who has trained soldiers all over the world in reenactment situations. The boot camp cadets will then put on a Vietnam-style reenactment 3 times per day for all visitors to watch. That reenactment will include taking over a machine gun that you'll be hearing an awful lot. There's 2 of them in the park this year. The next addition to the vehicle event, the crew will be doing an ongoing Vietnam-style motor pool reenactment where vehicles will be restored and repaired on site and quickly so that visitors will be able to watch and learn how to do maintenance and repairs on all types of military vehicles ranging from 1940 to 1991, and the majority focusing on Vietnam. Finally, the Utah Military Historic Group will be in character, demonstrating how soldiers lived in a combat camp during World War II. The American Heritage Park, which is what we're calling Sarah Park for these 4 days, would not be complete without the Colonial Heritage Festival. Sharpen your pencils or go home and open your Freedom Festival magazines to page 50 and check the boxes for what you want to make sure and see at the Colonial Heritage event. And I'm watching to see who does. This year in the park, we are featuring a new storytelling tent being run by Sharon Rogers, a former storyteller at Colonial Williamsburg. On Monday evening at 8 p.m., we will have a public dance on the Continental Field to learn the dances of the period. Kind of think Pride and Prejudice, if you've seen the movie, with the dances, the reels. And in the storytelling tent that evening, Sharon is going to be sharing some real and not so real ghost stories from the colonial era. Now, this is important. Don't miss the following. In room 101 at the Sierra Center for the Arts will be the long-awaited Brent Ashworth Family American Heritage Museum, featuring artifacts and documents from 1600 to 1865. See one of two Bibles brought over by William Bradford on the Mayflower, the Joseph Smith Jr. and Emma Hale Smith Family Bible with the names of all of their children written in Emma's hand, the only place where even the dead children that had passed away, our names are put. See Ulysses S. Grant's poker table he used during the Civil War, and see two special copies of the Declaration of Independence, including the first printed version on July 9th, 1776, and the stone Declaration of Independence made 50 years after the original Declaration started deteriorating. It is a stone copy of the Declaration that is typically on display in Washington. Only a few of the originals remain. We are also offering free showings of National Treasure featuring Nicolas Cage throughout the day, Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday at Show House 2 at the Sierra. On Sunday, come and enjoy an evening at the Heritage Observance at the Sierra Shell at 8 p.m. Our keynote speaker will be Brent Ashworth, and he will read from the actual letters of George Washington and other founders and leaders of our country. There will be musical numbers, and founding fathers will be there. But before that, Sam, who's going to be doing our Pledge of Allegiance this year?
My daughter, Kenzie.
Kenzie is going to be our little Orem patriot doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And we will introduce that program at that event. We're excited for her. And then also Miss Orem and her attendants will be our special hostesses to welcome people into the park. You can't miss the hot bread from the bakery or making your own wanted poster at the print shop. Especially those of you who are running, do that. Or have your silhouette cut by our guest artist, Robert Carlson from Maine, Disneyland. We invite you to come and spend the day with us and see just how awesome our event really is. All three of these events in the park are synergistic with each other, and we almost have a complete story of the United States as you walk the park. The only thing we need to complete it is you. If you don't want to walk around the park, just meet me at the Cup and Quill off 400 East entrance, and I will give you a ride around the whole park in our golf cart provided by Kevin Stratton. I'll entertain questions if you have them, but if there are none, I will let you ponder momentarily on the thoughts of just what a great contribution our events make to the city of Orem, and in conjunction with America's Freedom Festival. My husband's going to come up, and here's a little gift for your efforts to listening to me tonight. Printed on our press, it is the Congress's declaration of a day of humility, prayer, and fasting as to whether we should seek independence from England or make amends and turn our allegiance back to King George. It is signed by John Hancock and declaring, "God save the people." You have a quill there. If you want it sharpened, you have to come, and Daniel will sharpen it for you at the Cup and Quill. But we just want to let you know that we are so grateful for your service, for Care Tax, for the City of Orem, for Parks and Recreation, for everybody, the police officers. We met with Lieutenant Martinez today. This is going to be an awesome event. And the people of Freedom Festival are getting a little jealous because we're doing a good thing. I'm done. Any questions? I'll leave you alone. Now do your work.
So I just wanted to say thank you very much. It's a great thing you all do, and if I remember right, you said you get about 60,000 people that show up?
We go between 45 and 60. We don't have an exact count, but by the way, police officers, and by our counts and the way we see the depth of people in lines and the exchange every hour over the 3 days, we have about, I would say, kind of a 50,000, but enough that we stop counting now because it's big. I don't think I ever want to ever have another flyover with candy being dropped. They had to shut down State Street and people were walking from the mall and from Target. And I would suspect we have actual pictures, if you ever want to see them, of people shoulder to shoulder, literally in the whole park, both sides of the shell, all the way up to the Sierra Elementary School. There had to have been at least 75,000 there to watch the plane fly over. And yeah, I don't ever want to do that again.
I was there in that crowd.
But yeah, you know what it was like then. But yeah, people are getting to know about us, and we have marketed this in all 4 states around Utah. We have groups that come from as far away as Nebraska to this event now to participate. And our General Washington, Daniel Shippey, and his family come from California. He has been, he was a consultant for Turn, if you saw any of those shows on PBS and other stations. So we have some class acts that, like I said, the gentleman that does our silhouettes has the silhouette shop on Main Street in Disneyland. And he also is the #1 Santa Claus helper at Disneyland. So come and get your silhouettes and come see Kenzie do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's cool.
Well, it is a great event, and I know that the public loves it every year, so thank you very much.
I need to see a smile on every one of your faces, because you know what? This is not a boring night. This is a great night. And sometimes I don't get to write about smiles on faces of the city council. And I like your haircut, Mark.
So thank you, Janelle. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Julie.
Mr.
Appreciate it very
Mayor,
much.
I have a
Yes.
light. Can I make a comment? Did my light shine?
Oh, sorry. Let your lights.
You mentioned various activities on various dates. For those who didn't catch it, is there a website they can go to where we can see all these calendar of ideas?
Unplug it. So Freedom Festival Magazine, page 50 through 52, will also help you with that. We have a Facebook, we have brochures in the park, there's maps, and schedule of events will be handed out at the information desk.
And again, for those watching or the people who are here, it starts what day?
July 1st at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Saturday, July 1st, this Saturday.
9 o'clock, and we go until 6, but we expect people not to be out of there till 7. We linger a very long time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll now move on to personal appearances. There appears to not be anybody who has signed up for a personal appearance, so we will move on. Does not appear to be any consent items, so we will move forward with our scheduled items. First one is a continuation of a public hearing, PEG Development PD-48, an ordinance. This item has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant, so we will not move forward with that and move on to item number 13, which is a public hearing for the Parks Master Plan. This is a resolution adopting the City of Orem Parks, Recreation, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan and amending the Orem City General Plan to include the City of Orem Parks, Recreation, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan as Appendix G. Reed Price, I believe, is our presenter, and I believe Mark Vlasic is here to present as well. Did you get it, Sam? Thanks.
Mayor and Council, we appreciate your listening to us this evening. Tonight culminates about 8 months of planning. Back in October of 2016, we began a process to create a master plan for the city's parks, recreation, and trails. We went through an RFP process and selected, Landmark Design as our consultant. We have had a great interaction with them. They've been a great resource to us as we've identified the needs that we have as a community through our build out. We have gone through numerous meetings with with staff, as well as a steering committee consisting of city staff and city commission representatives and other interested recreational interests, and have also gone through a couple of open houses to seek input from the city. I've received input through other means, including comments online, and we have condensed all of the information into a document that we are hoping to have adopted tonight. With that, I'll turn the time over to Mark Vlasic, who is the principal in charge of this project and the owner of Landmark Design.
Thanks, Reed, and thanks for inviting us here this evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'd like to stress the same thing that Reed was alluding to. It was a really good process here, very good community to work with, which isn't always the case. We've done about 50 of these plans over the years, and this has really been a quite remarkable one in that regard. What I'd like to do is give you a quick overview of the process. Do I have a time limit?
Faster the better.
Okay, so, and I'll just dive into it. So the purpose of this plan, as Reed mentioned, was to be adopted as part of your general plan, and that it will be an appendix to it, so it will give you policy direction. It's building upon that document and others, so it's really an important piece as you're making future decisions. And it's to give you strategies that you can implement in the future, so there's not a lot of question about whether a particular park or a particular investment is a good idea. It's structured into 6 chapters. We're looking at parks and open space separately from recreation. Recreation is dealing with mainly indoor recreation. And then trails. Then we have chapter 5 is the one that you'll probably be looking at the most as you use it in the future, when it's projecting costs and priorities for implementation. And then it ends with goals and policies. This is an infographic illustrating the planning process, and as you can see on the both sides, that there was a very significant public involvement process, as Reed mentioned, and that we had good public turnout. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We held a scoping meeting that also included what we call a visual preference survey back in November. It was, I think, a very good meeting. We had great ideas come out of that. Once we had developed some initial ideas and we had a survey put in, that it was in January, we then had a draft plan open house in April. And the survey was conducted by Y2 Analytics. They're I believe, on contract with the city. We've worked with them quite a bit on other projects, and they're top notch. And basically, this is a summary of the 5 main things that came out of the plan. The first was that there's a desire of residents to upgrade the fitness center and to have more trails. Fitness center, 88% of the residents have their rec desires addressed between those 2 elements. So they're a big part of how people recreate in the community. The number 1 reason that they go to a particular park is because it's close to home. And that means that walking is very important, and thinking about the connection between trail connections and sidewalks and linking the parks with other areas. there was a general opposition to spending a lot of money on most improvements. So that was interesting. That varies from community to community. And then the bathrooms in the parks emerged as an issue, that they're not open for long enough, or the season isn't long enough in particular. These images again illustrate sort of the general demographics. Part of what we do is project to the future, so we want to have an understanding of your community. You're different than a lot of the other Utah County communities. You're aging, and your population household size is declining, which is meaning that you're maturing. So that translates to a need for more diverse and balanced types of uses in parks and recreation uses. No longer just to focus on sports fields and playgrounds, but on other things to meet the needs of a more diversified population. The other thing that we found is that you have an annexation area where we assume there would be quite a bit of opportunity to have additional parks in it, but actually the level of growth there on its own doesn't warrant having significant new parks there, although we are recommending a new park there, but it's more of a regional park. But there's going to be a real need for parks in the areas of town that are densifying, just outside the city hall, along State Street and other areas like that. And so that's something to keep in mind, that there's a whole new type of desire and need for smaller parks. What we did, this is an illustration of one of the maps that we documented all of your parks and your trails. We then did a very extensive analysis. We visited all of the sites, documented very specifically what amenities or types of uses were happening at the various parks. We then classified them into 3 categories based primarily on size, but not only on size. So a regional community park, which is your largest parks. They attract people from long distances. And then we have neighborhood parks and mini parks, so just one very small mini park. There you have other parks and field areas, but we accounted for them, but we didn't include them in this figure, because this is the figure that we base future need off of. And if we put those other acres into that amount, it would artificially inflate the need that was required for the future. So it's really, these are a lot of the things that we did include either weren't owned by the city or weren't controlled by them. And so we we're very careful about that. One of the first things we do when we're calculating need for the future is have an understanding of what we call a level of service. And that's just where you take the population today and divide it, or take the acreage of the parks, divide by the population, and multiply by 1,000. So it's telling you that you have 2.77 acres of parkland for every 1,000 people. We also did a second analysis. So that's kind of giving you a sense of, in the future, you might either have somewhere around that number or slightly more, slightly less. It depends on your goals. The other analysis was see how well the parks were distributed. So we, as you can see on this map, we drew circles around the different types of parks depending on how big they were and which role they served. So the smaller parks had smaller distribution circles, and the larger ones larger. And what emerged from that were about 3 primary gaps. You can see them in the dark gray color. These are areas that aren't well served by parks in that geographic area. So the question then becomes, how do we fill the gaps? The first thing before we even project to the future is, how do we get the city today up to speed of where it should be? And based on conversations with staff and with the public and others, we're recommending that you acquire 2 additional parks in that large gap area.
Can I stop before you go further?
Mm-hmm.
Back up. How far was your parameters for how far away from a park was a concern?
The largest park was 1 mile, a regional community park. The neighborhood park was a 1/2 mile, and a mini park was a 1/4 mile. So that was the size of the radius.
So this would say if I'm more than a half a mile from a neighborhood park, you're suggesting another park in your proposal?
If there's no other park that you get an overlap of parks in some areas. You get a lot of overlap in some areas, and what we're really looking for is areas where there's nothing in nearby.
And by nothing, over a mile, over 2, over what?
So you'd have
in that gray area. It's basically saying in that gray area, if you on the photograph on the northwest corner, that area has nothing within that area park. The closest park would be the area that's shown in yellow.
And again, I'm trying to get an idea. If that's a mile and a half away, it's
at least a quarter mile. It could be up to a mile to the nearest park.
So you'd have to be in a gap. You'd have to exceed that threshold for all three.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were on the far northwest corner of the city there, you would be at least, probably about 2 miles from the park.
How much housing versus commercial is in that furthest northwest mile?
There's a significant portion that's the approximately 1,200 north, and that would be.
No, that's going down. That's 1,600 north.
Back to the other
corner. It's almost all commercial down there.
Well, I'm looking at the little.
No, we don't have land use.
The heart of that gap is right at 1,200 north, I believe. No.
Yeah, right.
Either 800 or 1,200.
Right in this area. Was that 800?
Yeah. Right.
Where is 800 north? Can you point to that?
It's along the bottom.
Here.
And
Right.
I assume the line in the middle is the State Street, correct?
It is.
That's correct.
And don't we have a junior high school there that has park type facilities?
Because the city doesn't own the facilities in that area, we have not accounted for them in our parks master plan because we
don't get to control it, I understand.
Cannot do that.
But it isn't like those neighbors don't have a green place to go walk to that's within a quarter mile, half mile, mile.
That's correct.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so we're recommending the acquisition of 10 acres of park in that area. We also we mentioned Chair Apple Park as the small mini park. There is a possibility to acquire land next to it that if we provided more, it would have a larger service area, and that would cover that area better than it is today. So we're recommending that an additional 1.3 acres be acquired adjacent to it. So once that's accounted for, we then took a look at our level of service again and adjusted it. We added the 11.3 acres that we just added, or that we're going to add in the future, to the existing acreage, and divided that total acreage by the population, and came up with a level of service of 2.89, so slightly higher than what it is today. After discussions with our committee and with the staff and others, sometimes there's a desire by younger communities to push that number up. Other communities want to say, we could live with having a slightly lower level of service. I think it was generally agreed that where we are today was good, that it was felt that Orem is providing good access to parks with the exception of filling those small gaps. So to meet that level of need in the future, you have 262.8 acres of parks today, an additional 11.3 to meet the gaps. By 2026, as your population isn't growing extremely rapidly, you'll need another 14.4 acres. So in 10 years, acquisition of additional 14.4 plus an additional 66.5 acres by 2060, which we anticipate you'll be fully built out by that time.
Mark, can you hold on a second? Sam, do you have a question?
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up on Tom's question. Do we know what Alpine School District's official policy is with their playgrounds? Are they intended to be open to the public for use by the public, or are they really just reserved for school children attending that school?
I can't say with full authority, but also as a public entity, it should be available for taxpayer use. However, for city's purposes, we can't count on it to be there. They could decide to close a school down and raise it if the demand wasn't there. But because we don't own it or or control it. We felt that we could not account for that officially.
Right.
We certainly recognize that they're there, but when it comes to planning for the needs of the citizens and the needs that the city can accommodate, we need to look at the properties that we can control.
Yeah. And yeah, realizing this is intended to be a long-range plan. It doesn't necessarily have to happen this year. But just to keep things in perspective as far as, do we have mitigating parks essentially in the interim until we have something that we do own and control to fill that gap that can help bridge until we get to that point?
Without property, no.
If I could add here, that's a very common practice that we recommend in communities that have absolutely no additional land to buy. Certain parts of Salt Lake County, we just worked on the Salt Lake County Parks Master Plan. There is absolutely areas that have gaps, major gaps, and what we recommend in that, so we kind of go through a hierarchy of scenarios. The first one being, if you have some land and it's available, it's in the best interest of the city to, in most circumstances, to purchase and develop a park. But we also recommend really developing and maintaining those relationships with school districts. Next on down the line would be private parks. A lot of communities have private parks that they can reach out. They're made usually for only their members of an HOA. And then the very last scenario is to reach out with churches that may have sports fields and those sorts of things and open them up to the general public. And so and every community is different. So whatever your goal is, as far as how much you want to control your use or the longevity of knowing that park is actually there for eternity, that's sort of the balancing point that I think each community has to take a look at. And so again, we thought it was a good idea. I think it was taken on board by the committee, but if that isn't comfortable and you want to take a closer look at working together with the schools, that's something, I guess, that could be adjusted in the plan.
Yeah. So Jamie, maybe the next time we meet with Alpine, we can include this as one of the items to understand, what is their official policy on public use of their playgrounds, and what does their long-range plan look like for the schools that could potentially be in those gap areas if we need something to bridge us to the point where we have park space available.
So we don't have unlimited time.
Okay.
So if we could get through this in the next 10 minutes, that would be helpful.
So these are just images of the new types of parks that we're envisioning along State Street. We see the bulk of those being developed as part of private initiatives for new development. There's 4 projects that are on the books now or that are in the process of being implemented now. So that's chipping away at meeting need for the future. We then identify sort of the basic services for the 3 types of parks. I'll quickly go through that, but the reason we do that is so that we're looking for any parks that really don't have the proper facilities at the time for meeting need. And then we looked at open space. Orem is unique that you don't have a whole lot of natural open space, but there's sort of the beginning or the remnants of old systems. So we're recommending that any time there's an opportunity to acquire or support open space such as agricultural land that might be retained for the future, that those actions are taken. As far as recreation, really the focus was on the fitness center and on the pool, but the fitness center was mentioned as the public was really in support of improving it. Programs and other activities we looked at, and we're recommending that they be slightly expanded. There's a call for additional community events and additional programming. As far as trails, we worked very closely with your staff, and basically that we came up with, out of the survey, again, this was highly supported, that we wanted to get a clear understanding of what's on the docket today and what's proposed for the future of the different types of trails, from on-road to fully separated to natural type trails. We did an extensive mapping exercises of creating sort of a trail concept for the future. the trails for the future, really, what we're recommending is that you focus on your regional trails and multi-use trails first, and that you then implement what we're calling a mountain to lakeshore trail system so that you get the community fully connected east to west as well as north to south, cooperating with your neighboring communities, and that you provide better connections and more connections to the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, which is, as you know, is just outside your boundaries. So the recommendations is that on-street bike facilities should be implemented as part of street and roadway upgrading as whenever possible, and that your complete streets program and you have an element of your policy now that if adding bike lanes are going to increase the cost by 10% of a road project, that was the limit. We're recommending that be increased to 20%, and that there's more integration of education, transit, that sort of thing about the benefits of a active transportation system. 5 new trailheads are proposed and trail accesses and upgrading of some of the trailheads, that you have some hotspot intersections where it's quite dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists. So we're recommending that some care be taken about that. That in the long run that we establish a dedicated funding source for trail implementation, and that some sort of commission be established to oversee trail issues. You have the number one group of people that came to our public meetings seem to be trail people. They're very active and very engaged. We then took a look at your amenities in your existing parks. We compared them to national standards and sort of local standards. We identified some gaps, but then when we looked closer at them, those gaps weren't really as not only acute, some of them really didn't exist. They just on paper existed. And so the key things that for your existing parks is to upgrade your existing sand volleyball court. That showed that there was a need for more basketball courts. That's not true because there's no demand for it. The pickleball is really a big deal right now. Everybody's clamoring for it. We're recommending that you start slowly and gauge it as you move into the future. And as far as skate parks, there's a need for another one somewhere in the near future, that you consider maybe different models of skate parks that are serving the needs of kids. So to summarize, to meet the need for the additional, those elements we just talked about, the pickleball courts and that, is about $1.3 million. To acquire land into the future and to develop the parkland through build-out is about $16.7 million. Your trails in the long run is about just over $15 million for both. We broke it down by the 10-year profile of the plan and then out to the future, so long-term, short-term. And that for trails, there's also a recommendation for having an annual budget for it so that significant inroads can be made, that it would be more for the next 10 years and then it would decrease through build-out. And then so that's a total of just over 32 million over the next, I guess that's about 45 years. We then looked at particular deferred maintenance types of costs and catching up with them over the next 10 years. That's really sort of a detail of this plan. We went into much more detail than we typically do, but that's saying that over the next 10 years, about $1.2 million per year are required, and you can see it's not the same amount every year, but it's to meet that need. And then we conclude the plan with an action plan, both for sort of construction and improvement projects, so short-term, long-term, and then we conclude with an action plan for goals and policies, things that don't necessarily cost money but are going to help guide this plan as it moves into the future. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the council?
Could you just go back 2 slides real quick? So just to make sure I'm understanding, the 2019 figures there for playground replacement are much higher. Is that the altogether playground, or is that factored into that number? That's where we have that spike. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that It wasn't something that we were anticipating that each year. I know we have capital projects that any surplus funds will get allocated, but that really was kind of a one-time issuance, you could say, and then it will kind of level out going forward. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Councilor Sumner has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you identify the locations of parks or approximate location, and that land becomes available, what's kind of the process on that? Does the city get in a bidding war with the landowner, with the developer, or?
You hope not. Buy it. That's what our recommendation. We've made enough recommendations of this in the past, and a good example, I think I even mentioned to you before, was Taylorsville, where they started out as a new community, had no parks. The main recommendation in their general plan that we did for them was to buy, it was close to 80 acres or 100 acres of parkland. They did. They used all their budget for it and didn't have any money to develop it for the next 10 years. And now they look back at it, and that property has quadrupled, or the price has been astronomical. They couldn't acquire it today if they had to. And so they kind of thanked us that we've really pushed them hard in that. But I'd say whatever means you can, and if you can keep it so it's an agreement, some sort of side agreement or whatever, those are really details I can't get into. I know that it is a benefit of a community sometimes to enter into negotiations so that there's not those sorts of things can certainly happen, and we would recommend whatever you can do to get the best possible price for the community.
So from the planning department side, if someone comes in with large acreage and develop it, you wouldn't require a park in that, even though that was marked for a possible park or open space?
Right now, we don't have anything that's marked for that. We do plan on, when State Street develops along the corridor, to ask for some small parks to be developed with larger development, but that's all we have right now.
Okay, so it's just negotiation back and forth. Thanks.
Jamie, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts relative to what we're talking about. There have been situations, as you well know, where we have been outbid for property. Probably the most notably of pieces is Williams Farm. And so there will be in the future opportunities where we will be outbid. But one of the things that I think we can also look at too is as some of these bigger parcels come into play, we can have conversations with the developer and see if it's possible to, for example, grant them additional density in some of the acreage, leaving the remainder of that acreage for us for development of park space. So, for example, if they want to come in and develop 10 acres and the permitted zoning is R8, maybe we allow them to develop to R6 standard and essentially leave us a couple of acres to use towards park space. There's a number of ways to manage it. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a huge problem in the future because, frankly, we just don't have a lot of acreage remaining that is available to develop. And so anything that we do, I don't really see us making a play for a large regional park into the future just because we don't have the acreage to do it. But some of these other options and opportunities may work well. The other thing I just want to reinforce is, and Mark kind of spoke to it, we do have a lot of open space that is not included in this plan. You look at Orem Community Hospital, the acreage around the hospitals, the Alpine School District, Sleepy Ridge, we have detention basins, so on and so forth, that in some respects people use and take advantage of as open space. But it's not identified specifically as part of our plan. So I think we are looking towards a level of service that I believe is conservative, but I also think it meets the needs of our community. And in all the survey work we've done over time, one of the things that comes back all the time very positive is we love all the parks in Orem. We love the open space. So I don't think we're trying to actively solve a problem that exists. I don't believe a problem does exist. I think we just want to maintain what we have, and that level of service that we're trying to maintain is not way above reality.
I could also say that the large park that we are recommending we're envisioning it primarily as a nature park, as primarily wetlands. There's some great opportunity to get a bulk of that land as a conservation easement or something like that. So, some of that, and we have some tools in here for acquiring land in non-traditional ways. Those should be carefully looked at each opportunity. And I think exactly the density bonus, that sort of thing, is a really big player. The bulk of the land along State Street, we do think will have some opportunity to be the same sort of thing as part of developing to greater density. So,
Councilor McDonald has a question.
Could you go back to a couple slides that talked about total budget? There you go.
Oh, sorry.
No, that one was a big nut to swallow. Frankly, I'm not ready to vote in favor of $32 million based on a 30-minute presentation. Happy to, although it's only a plan, I think it's tough when we look at what this does compared to what our current budget is for this. This is a significant increase that I think I'd be uncomfortable doing that until we have some more study, Mr. Mayor. So that's my concern, is to hear a presentation. We all love parks, but we also have to pay for those parks. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves and the public to say, how do we swallow a $32 million bill? Because if that $32 million was coming by way of easements or conservation changes, this has a price tag on it that isn't free for many of these parks. And so I'm concerned about the size of this thing we're suggesting that we accept without the normal kind of due diligence that we get with our financial budgets and a lot of information over a number of weeks. So that's my concern about this.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Jamie.
May I just respond to that? Because I think it is a real concern. At the same time, it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of situation where, in order for us to proceed with the establishment of impact fees within the community, we need to have a master plan. It needs to be an adopted plan that essentially identifies kind of the direction we're going to head into the future. And based on the adoption of that plan, we can then assess impact fees. Those impact fees then, in part, become part of that revenue stream that we need to build some of these amenities in the community. And so one of the reasons we haven't moved as quickly forward with our impact fees as we would have liked is because this is a deficiency that requires review and adoption before we can proceed and finalize our impact fees. This type of plan becomes the foundation by which we can impose a fee. If we don't have this as the foundation, then the development community, the Home Builders Association, others can say, well, what are you basing your fee on? Well, we base our fee on an objective quantitative evaluation as to what our current level of service is and what it's going to cost us to maintain that level of service across the community into the future. So it is a little bit of a challenge. And I will represent that, yes, the numbers are very, very big. We don't intend to come to you, for example, in the next fiscal year and say, okay, well, this is how we're going to crack the $11 million nut to start with. But it is something that we need to start consciously thinking about as we move forward is, okay, when we do have the means available to do new things or to do different things, parks and trails should be part of that discussion.
If I could also add that this is over a 44-year period, and if we divide that by 44, it's about $700,000 a year.
Compared to our current budget of what, sir?
I don't know.
That'd be a pretty critical question for those of us being able to do another $750,000 a year.
Well, for example, we in recent years we've probably budgeted $500,000 plus in the replacement of play structures, the reconstruction of trails and paths, work on restroom improvements, ball field improvements, so on and so forth. So we are setting money aside. We're not setting sufficient money aside to address all of these concerns. But I would hope in the future that this could become, in part, a document to help us decide how to best allocate resources in the future. We're obviously going to continue to need to replace tennis courts and make improvements to play sets and so on and so forth. But this also can be part of our stream of consciousness as we have conversations about where to best spend our parks and trails money.
Councilmember Lentz.
So this slide that we're on, is this the total, or is this like in other words, are we looking at the entire pie of what this plan was talking about, or is this just a subsection of it?
This does not include any improvements to the rec center, nor does it include the deferred maintenance budget amount.
And I mean, do you have those numbers handy? Know what the
rec center, we indicate in the plan, we're actually going to delete it because it's such an unknown. We have $5 million estimated, and we think it's likely to be higher than that. But it was approximately $13 million or $12 million for the deferred maintenance. So that the totals here, where you have 33.7 plus 18 are your totals.
So, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about $1 million each year from care tax that goes to purposes like this. If anything, this wouldn't even fully allocate all of those funds because it's dedicated to recreation, parks, these types of. So this isn't an incrementally new $33 million. We're saying we want a plan in place so we understand this is the long-range plan we have for those funds, as well as things like CDBG funding and those types of things that can augment that as well.
Yeah, if I may also make a comment, and this heads back to a few of the initial slides that Mark shared with you. We have a community that very much wants these type of amenities. We also have a community that very much does not want to pay for these kind of amenities. So we have to walk that fine line of deciding what's in the best interest, how do we do it, how do we remain sensitive to essentially both sides of that ledger. Yes, we want improvements to the rec center. If those improvements cost $10 million, well, we don't want to spend the $10 million, but we want you to clean the place up. Well, how do you do that? That's kind of a perennial challenge that we face. People have very high expectations, but a very low tolerance for the means by which we can pay for those improvements.
So let me just comment. One of the main reasons that I actually voted no last month on our care allocation on the arts and cultural side was I'm not yet comfortable with the process we're using to go through that, figuring out how we put money here and put money here, because it in my mind, that process is so dependent on, again, the emotions of the 7 individuals up here casting their votes. Whereas I think this puts much more of a science to our long-range planning for that other half of the care tax allocation. So it doesn't just come down to, you know what, I'm in the mood for this kind of park this year, but it fits our long-range plan of what our residents want to see.
And if I may, too, this is going to change over time. 10 years ago, nobody even knew what pickleball was. In fact, for me, 2 years ago, I didn't know what pickleball was. But today, it's all the rage, and now everybody's building pickleball courts. And you know what? And a year from now, everybody's going to be building bike skill courses, because that's what I'm hearing. And 5 years down the road, it's going to be something else that probably isn't even reflected in our plan today. So this is going to change and vacillate a little bit. And yeah, granted, it might get more expensive, but it also might get cheaper as we look at kind of people's habits, so on and so forth. The big thing right now is trails. Everybody wants trails. Well, given where we are as a community, the maturity of our community, not everybody is interested in play systems today. Given where we are demographically, they're interested in walking and more passive type of activities and pickleball. And so there's a life cycle too, if I may, to some of these plans also. And I think we need to be sensitive to that and understand that if we were to adopt and approve this plan tonight, this doesn't lock us into the next 44 years of what we will do. In fact, I would represent to you that this is probably something we should revisit every 5 to 7 years. We just happen to have never done this before.
That recommendation is in the plan to revisit it every 5 years.
So if I could get a word in here, it's pretty tough to do on this particular topic, but
You're usually pretty good at that, Mayor.
but if I could just take a second on this particular screen, I like the master plan that we're putting forward. I understand Tom's concerns on the money. As I look at the money here, I look at this as just ideas on what it might cost and not necessarily what it's really going to cost. So let me explain. If we go to P2 on this particular screen, it says expand Cherapple Park 1.3 acres, $650,000. I don't believe it's going to take $650,000 to buy 1.3 acres next to Cherapple Park and expand the park. I disagree with that. Number 3, implement the dog park.
Are you saying it would cost more?
I'm saying it would cost much less. Implement the dog park, Southwest Park, landscape, site improvements in 800 North Trailhead Park and Bike Skills Park. Bike Skills Park, when talking to Carl about it, he's saying maybe $50,000, $60,000 with what we're looking at. The 800 North Trailhead Park, that's like $1 million, $1.5 million. The dog park, I don't remember the total figure, but it seemed like it was $150,000, $200,000. Anyway, I don't believe the 2.3 million is correct. I believe that's way inflated. If I come down further, if we talk about constructing the new Bike Skills Park, we already have it up here on P3, but now we have it on P8, 1.1 million. Again, when I'm talking to Carl, we're looking at 50, 60,000. So these figures here, I don't, be honest with you, put much confidence in. Redeveloping, if you can let me stay with this, redeveloping the Orem Fitness Center, we're looking at doing that through the care tax. Now, we can look at a brand new one for 20 million or 40 million, or we can look at the 8 million that we have over the 8 years through our care tax to spend on that. That's not necessarily coming out of this other figure. That's a figure that's coming through our care tax. So personally, as I look at these figures, I feel like they're inflated. If I was doing the master plan, I would inflate them as well. I don't feel like they're accurate. I don't feel like we're voting on that we're going to commit the next councils for the 44 years or 40 years from now to spend $33 million. I look at, though, at the idea that this is a master plan. I like the master plan. I don't like the figures. I don't agree with the figures, but I also don't think this commits us to any kind of plan that we're going to spend $10 million or that we're going to spend $1 million on a new bike skills park that we can do for under $100,000. So those are the kinds of things I think we ought to adopt the plan and maybe adopt it. Personally, I would adopt it with saying that these figures are estimates only, period, and leave it at that. And I don't think these estimates are accurate. I would not stand behind them myself. So I'm kind of with Tom on the money, but at the same time, I think we need to adopt this. I think this is a good plan. I like the plan. I don't agree with the figures at all. Councilmember Spencer.
So Jamie, you mentioned impact fees. And maybe you could explain exactly what an impact fee is and then who pays that fee. I think that might be relevant.
So we have, as a city, historically, we have never assessed park impact fees. What we are trying to do right now is we are trying to determine what our current level of service is for park amenities within our community. And then those who come into our community into the future and they develop and they place additional burden or impact on those amenities, we have an opportunity to assess a fee for that added impact on our park infrastructure. One of the challenges we face as it relates to trying to price out all of these amenities is we are trying to get a ballpark figure, a realistic ballpark figure as to what some of these things will cost. If we were to go in and say, well, I don't think that this number is realistic, we're going to cut it in half, we're going to cut this by a third, we're going to cut this by a quarter, then that reduces the overall amount, which actually then puts us in a situation of not being able to assess the same impact fees had we kept these numbers as is. Now, into the future, as the cost of things increase, we could find ourselves in the awkward situation of trying to build amenities but not having collected sufficient money to maintain the current level of service. So if we have an amenity we believe costs $1 million, but we've built in $1.2 million, if we cut it back, that thereby affects the impact fee that we can assess. And in the future, if it does end up costing us $1.2 million, well, then there's a $2 million gap that we need to fill. And where are we going to fill that gap? We're going to fill it using existing dollars in our budget that is essentially money that's being generated by current customers. So those that are new to the community are not bearing the full impact of that additional infrastructure or those additional amenities. So I don't agree with you, Mayor, that there may be a little flex in these numbers, but I think at the same time, developing a plan that includes relatively realistic numbers is the focus rather than trying to develop a plan that identifies to the dollar what we think everything is going to cost.
So, and I understand that. If we're looking at impact fees being derived off of this plan, I would want this plan to be taken back and looked at a second time for realistic figures. And I'm not talking about trying to put some fudge factor in there, but you know, if I look at a skills park at $1.1 million and I'm told by our director of recreation that it's going to cost us less than 100, then where's the other $1,050,000? And if we're taking impact fees off of that, I don't feel like that is correct or right. Let me finish. Before I would agree to vote for this, and I like the plan, I would want to have figures that are realistic in today's term, realizing that we may have inflation, we may have other factors, but I can't feel good about voting for things that I know the figures are incorrect, that we're then going to charge impact fees off of when we've got an inflated group of figures here.
Well, and I would respectfully disagree and say I think you would be surprised at how expensive it is to develop park property. Everything from the acreage necessary to develop a park to parking infrastructure that's tied to this, restroom facilities, irrigation facilities. All of these things are not, we're not even talking about specific additional amenities that are part of a park. You know, just the cost of developing appropriate, we may say, well, we can build pickleball courts cheaper than what's noted here. We probably can, but have we taken into account parking? Have we taken into account restrooms? Have we taken into account some of the other things that don't necessarily show up here with just a very broad explanation as to what we're going to do? I completely understand where you're coming from. I would hesitate, though, to go back and to try and put essentially a lot of time in revising all these numbers, because I look at some of these and I know that they're going to be high, but I also look at others, most notably the Orem Fitness Center number, and I know that number is woefully deficient. So I think there is give and take in all of these numbers, to the positive and to the negative.
Councilor McDonald.
Mark, my guess is, with the exception of the rec center number, which you said was a kind of a placeholder because you didn't know it exactly. The others, you have much more expertise in this than us in developing parks, et cetera. Are you feeling they're within a tolerance level that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would like to point out, the difference between the way that impact fee numbers are calculated and what we use for planning purposes. What's really important with the impact fees is the acreage. We're working together with Zions Bank. They're our partners on this project. They're doing the impact fees. There are only certain things that impact fees, because as we all know, impact fees are potentially very contentious. They are basically acreage for lawns and sports fields and trails. Susie Becker from Zion's Bank we sit down together, we talk about each park, which is lawn, which is fields, which is trails, and she calculates them totally separate from these numbers. These are, the mayor is right, these are placeholders. We used a $250,000 per acre acquisition cost, or we took that down based on, we checked with some of your real estate people, and a $250,000 per acre development cost, a very typical standard costs that are used in the region. We adjusted yours down slightly based on some recent purchases you made. And I think that you're absolutely right. We always would like these to be slightly higher than lower at this stage because we're planning for the future. It's not meant to be a budget. This is not a budget. It's a hallmark to looking forward to the future of what the range, the magnitude of what you're thinking.
Can I bring you back to my question, Mark?
Yeah.
Are these within a reasonable tolerance level of what you think is accurate?
I do.
Okay. Then the other question I have is, before we expended these budgets, our financial people would tell me what we currently are spending, what this incremental revenue amount might cost us in a year, and then we could see if the impact fees was a sufficient delta to be able to enter into these costs. So I go back from my earlier statement and said, look, I'm not excited, and this measurement did not have, this is what we're currently budgeting or what we're averagely spending, and this is the estimated increase, and then how much of this do we think we can get from impact fees? That particular part of the study has not been done, and if I understand what Jamie said, it's somewhat of a chicken and an egg thing. We need to get this approved before we can properly measure what impact fees are, before we can say, Tom, you're living within, Tom and other members of the council and the mayor are living within an appropriate budget or not. And so I'm being educated as we go along here that some of this is your estimates, although they disagree with the mayor's, may have a degree of flexibility with reasonableness within a professional group that we've hired to do this. No disrespect meant to you, Mr. Mayor, but just they do this all the time. And if we can sharpen our pencil and get it a little cheaper, then that's part of the budgetary process in the future years. Is that, Reed, have you see this as well? Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, I think you've summarized many of the...
I should have made the report tonight is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Would have gone, no, thank you. You did wonderful. Thank you very much.
And if I may, Councilmember McDonald, Bren Bybee is actually participating in this meeting via our internet site, and he's been texting me, and he has reviewed these suggested costs with Susie Becker of Zion's Bank. And so there has been a QA/QC quality check effort has been made to try and essentially make sure we're in the ballpark relative to these fees.
And so why we think they're high, Mr. Bybee and Zion's Bank and Mark believe them to be reasonable.
Correct.
Councilor,
okay, no, that's fine.
Councilor Sumner would like to say something.
I'd just like to ask, the impact fee schedule, is that developed by Zion's Bank or an independent party, or is it?
That's correct. We're part of the Zion's Bank team. We were tasked with preparing the master plan first so that they could use our data and information to develop the impact fees, and so that there was a correlation between what was proposed in the master plan and what would be coming out of the impact fee study.
Are there any regulations on impact fees, state or?
Yes, and there's very clear, like I mentioned, very clear regulations on what can be used for impact fees and what cannot be. And that's what we've been meeting with Susie regularly about, was to make sure that we had good numbers. She's more concerned about our acreages and miles of trail than our costs used for planning purposes.
I think, Jamie, you said in one of our meetings, Orem is probably one of the only communities that does not have impact fees. Is that correct?
I should add that when this was discussed with the Public Works Advisory Commission, they were adamant that we look at impact fees for parks and other areas of the city as well, because they felt that we have missed out on a great opportunity over many years to fund recreational and park amenities. So this is also in response to a request from the Public Works Advisory Commission.
I've got some things I'd like to say, but we'll hear from Councilwoman McDonald.
Well, not only to fund, but to equally share. The citizens of Orem who have been here for 50 years have paid for all these parks, and the new people who move in ought to pay their pro rata share, and that's, I understand, what an impact fee is meant to do.
That's correct. And I should respond, when you asked about regulations for impact fees, are there some? And we answered absolutely. And one of the first ones is you have to have a plan in place. So by having this plan in place, that allows us to continue down the path to identify what those impact fees are.
So, Carl, could you come up to the podium for just a second? Could you just tell me what the dog park, how much have we spent on the dog park?
Spent $180,000.
And how much do you think the bike skills park is going to cost?
Well, our conversation we had and the number I gave you was for the skills portion of it.
Right.
It was never meant to be a project cost. That'll be
Okay.
all base dependent. And so the skilled part of it will be in that 60 to 80,000. But the project, I can't give you. I never meant it to be a project. A project cost. I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
While he's up, Mr. Mayor, Carl, what's the value of the land underlying that? Because that's part of the impact fee issue. I mean, we already own the land, and the land's worth several $100,000 an acre, I'm guessing, up there. How many acres is it? And I'll pencil the map.
I think it's about 3, but there's so many easements and so many things through there, I couldn't give you a number.
Okay. So $500,000 to $1 million, roughly. I'll say the number, but we bought 3 acres up there. So thank you.
Okay.
So again, I believe that these figures, in my opinion, are way inflated and much higher than they should be.
But they're right on if you consider the land, Mr. Mayor.
Not necessarily. I don't know. You're talking about $500,000, and we're talking about
No, I said $500,000 to $1 million. So
I don't know that I would agree that 3 acres up there are going to be $1 million in that particular spot and that kind of land. So Dusty Dastrup just bought 9 acres up there for, 15 acres for $90,000. Not too far away from there. So if you're actually looking at land value,
that's why we're trying to rely on the experts. And
so I don't think it's $300,000 an acre in that particular area. Nor do I think we should put Bike Skills Park in 2 different spots here, and we have almost $3.5 million for the dog park and the Bike Skills Park in 2 spots, and the 800 North Trailhead Park. So again, we are running impact fees. Again, we do have land and other costs, but I think these figures are way inflated and way too high. So
what number you're thinking? Cut that number in half, Mayor, or what?
Well, I would get just get an accurate figure. I mean, if we're paying for a
but we don't know what these projects are yet. We're making estimates into the future.
So the Bike Skills Park is pretty easy to figure that. We've already done the dog park, the 800 North Trailhead Park. We know what that is.
You've done one ballpark or dog park, but you don't know if we're going to need another one, or you don't know if we're going to need to buy additional land for it.
Well, we're talking about the dog park that we're trying to put in, and that's the one we put in, and we're spending $2.3 million for it.
Why are we forecasting future dog park on a dog park we just put in? Why aren't we just saying the same thing? Hey, we already put in a lakeside park down there. Let's add that in the budget and forecast.
Well, I wasn't aware that we had 2 or 3 dog parks. I was aware we only had 1, and it says implement a dog park, which is what we've just done.
How many dog parks does Provo have?
I have no idea.
More than 1.
Well, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I don't think we're going to spend $2.3 million after we've just spent $180,000.
Over the next 20, 30 years, I don't think you know what we're going to spend, Mayor. I think that's the point of this. They're looking ahead. What's the time frame on the...
This is over the next 10 years, not the next 20 years.
And you know exactly what we're going to do over the next 10 years.
This is the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know how many dog parks, and that's not what the point is. The point is implement a dog park. We've done one, $180,000.
The point is they're trying to make estimates on what future costs are going to be.
So the problem is we're going to charge
people. Hold on, excuse me. For a number of amenities that have been identified as part of the master plan. We don't have specifics on the amenities, but we have rough ideas on what the amenities would be needed. We don't know where they're going to be. We don't know what the property is going to cost. We're trying to put a rough idea of a dollar figure that we can say this is what we need to plan for in a long-term budget. And I think from that standpoint, we're trying to just get something to plan around. And if you're thinking this is you want to cut it in half to 15 million or something over the next 10 years, well, then make that recommendation. But
no, I'm explaining my thought pattern behind that.
Okay.
And what I'm pointing out is that we are charging impact fees to somebody who's building a new home. So I'm having to justify why are we saying that these things are going to cost that much money either now or within the next 10 years, and we're going to charge you X amount of dollars for that impact fee, when I have a hard time justifying that we have the same item in two different items here, and that we're looking at $3.4 million for, if you want to call it, an additional dog park, a bike skills park, and site improvements at the 800 North Trailhead Park. So I'm saying, to me, I don't know that I can justify that to a citizen and say, the reality is it's going to cost down here less than $1 million, but we're going to put it up here at $3.5 million, and we're going to charge that to your property, and you're going to have to pay that. So I'm for moving, looking at the future and the costs in the future. I think these are way inflated. But before anybody else jumps in, if we could, this is an open hearing, a public hearing, and I'd like to be able to hear any comments from the public. So I'd like to open it up to the public at this particular moment. Would anybody like to come forward and make a comment? Okay, seeing that there's no comments, we'll bring it back to the council. Councilmember Lentz.
I'd just like to reiterate that we're not voting on impact fees right now. So if I disagree with a specific number on here, that doesn't mean that, if I say this number should be half what it is, that doesn't change what the impact fees could potentially be once we get to that discussion. I'm happy with what's been proposed. I'm ready to make a motion. If others want to make comments and go back and forth, that's fine, or propose a counter motion, but when we're ready, I'm ready to move that we approve it as.
So I'd like to ask a question to Jamie. On the impact fees, how are you proposing to figure out what the figure is to start out with? Are you planning on using the sum total of these figures as the starting point for the impact fee that we will then charge to the citizen?
Well, this becomes a foundational piece to that overall impact fee discussion and assessment. So yes, this would become in part
the basic figure we'd start out with.
And I would like to suggest to you that there is a separate process established, but it does incorporate findings found within this parks master plan. And in addition to that, there is a requirement for us to develop a capital facilities plan that then also is used as a, more specific guide for the assessment of impact fees. Mark is identifying a 40-plus year plan. State law is very specific as to, the assessment of fees can be based and needs to be based on a time frame that's much narrower than that. In fact, if you collect impact fees, you have a very limited window by which to spend those dollars. So this becomes the foundation, but it doesn't become the only basis by which fees are assessed.
And yeah, I would like to just say that these numbers have nothing to do with the impact fee calculations. Impact fees are calculated off of cost of existing land, not of future. These are just for projection for future need.
Okay, so that is different than what I've been hearing. Yeah. The idea that we're looking at current value, not projected ideas here as the basis for the impact fee, I'm comfortable with. But if we're doing it off of these figures, which I think are highly inflated and over the first 10 years, then I'm not comfortable with. So, Jamie, maybe you could explain.
I guess, Mayor, what I would represent to you is I think this is a good faith effort at trying to identify future costs. When we had an opportunity to buy Williams Farm, for example, that was close to a 70-acre parcel that I believe the offer we made was in close proximity to $20 million. which would equate to about $285,000 an acre. And that was 10 years ago. Now, granted, it's not property that's, for example, directly in a residential neighborhood, but I do think that the costs of what we see here are representative of what it's going to cost us in the future to develop. I appreciate Mark's comments and feedback relative to impact fees. We are not using this as the sole determinant as to impact fees, but we are using this as foundation to establish impact fees into the future, as we are required to do by state law.
So you're using these figures or using current?
We're using the plan. We're using the plan.
What figures would you be using? Are you using these figures or current figures?
The acreage.
The acreage costs as developed by Zions Bank.
Of existing parks, fields, and trails.
You're not using these costs here.
These are to project for the future and to see where there will be gaps between what impact fees could fund and how you could fund them through other opportunities.
But you're not using these dollar figures for the impact fee.
Not these particular, but the plan will be used in its entirety as part of the document, the process for following impact fees.
Okay. All right.
Zions Bank will be developing an impact fee facilities plan. That's an additional planning process that follows adoption of this.
Okay. Councilmember Lurie.
So I went through this in American Fork as we looked at impact fees. The one thing that I can say is it's a great idea to every 5 years look at it, because you can get sued by developers, and they will sue you if your projections are way out of line. And so I think having a master plan is great, but I think we need to say every 3, 5 years, whatever, we have to be serious about updating it so that we always have a reason to justify where we're at. And I lived through that, and I know the pain about that. So I think this is great as far as a general plan, foundational, but I just recommend that we make sure that we always are updating this so we have current, accurate information that we can defend if we get sued by developers.
That's our intention.
All right, Sam.
I move that we adopt the City of Orem Parks, Recreation, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan and include it as Appendix G of the Orem City General Plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember McDonald.
Aye.
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 Nay?
Aye.
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 Okay, it passes. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to item number 14, which is a public hearing on a business license text amendment, amending sections 12-3-5, 12-3-6C, and 12-3-6D of the Orem City Code pertaining to license and business regulations. And we'll turn the time over to Jason.
Just connecting up a different device, I think.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I will be brief in my presentation to be able to address any questions that you may have. We're proposing a couple changes to the business license requirements. The first change is to require the businesses renew on an annual basis of when they actually make application for that business license. Right now we renew every December 31st. We'd like to do that on the month that they actually apply. So if it's in March, they would be due the end of March every year after that. That's the first change. The other change is to repeal the proration fee. With the being every December, we used to prorate. If somebody comes in November, we would prorate. They'd only pay the 2 months rather than the 24 or the 12 months. That needs to be eliminated because we're getting rid of that option. And then these fees that we're proposing are actually part of the adopted budget. So that is in the fees and charges that it was part of that budget. This is simply just putting it into the ordinance. So these are in place. These are currently what we charge. We're just actually codifying these numbers. And those are the proposed changes. So any questions, I'll be glad to address.
Any questions on the council? Yeah. Go ahead. Councilmember Seastrand.
So one thought I had was there's really no option in this change that if someone wants to move their date to where it's consistent with their annual renewal with the state licensing, that we just kind of keep them locked in. If they're already in there, we just kind of keep them that way. Do you want to give an option to where if somebody comes in and says, look, I want to get all my licensing done the same month, I do the state, I do all the other stuff in May, can I get that moved? Do you need an option for that?
There would probably, in the first year, we could probably work something out with them to do that, and so they would renew on that anniversary. I don't know if it's specifically written here, but that's something we could look at.
Okay.
I think this language actually gives us the flexibility to do just exactly that. We couldn't before.
Except so from I'm thinking if I'm currently paying in December and I want to move to May, I would pay a partial year until May and then come back in May and get it set up.
I think if that was something that Development Services and Business Licensing determined was workable, that under the ordinance we could do that, yeah.
Good, thank you.
So I think as part of moving forward, we have a lot of them that expire in December, and we would like to spread that out over the year. So we hopefully would work with some of the businesses and spread that out so we have an even amount throughout the year. So that's something, to Mark's point, we could do.
Any other comments from the council? Deputy Councilman Luray.
So I think this is a great change. When I was the American Fork Chamber of Commerce executive, business licensing was perceived very end of the year, people don't have the money. And so this seems like a logical, reasonable request. So I thank you for this change. And I know from the business community and my future experience, this will be much improved.
Thank you.
Councilman Lentz.
Just for the benefit of the public, because we talked about this a little bit in the pre-meeting, but can you just address what home occupation businesses would actually be required to pay the fee, and which, because there were some recent state changes to the legislature that would impact who actually has to pay a fee when they get a license for their home business.
So it's those, and Greg may have that state code, but anything that has a significant impact or an additional impact to the neighborhood. A typical office that you run out of your home doesn't have as an impact as a hair salon or a child daycare that actually has people coming to your home on a daily basis. That has a bigger impact, and the city, by state law, can charge them a business license fee. But the state law changed that for a typical home occupation that's running an office or whatever that doesn't have people coming to their homes, we can no longer charge that fee. So those businesses that actually do impact the neighborhoods, we can charge them the fee.
And the idea being that even those that don't pay the fee would still get a license for their business, they just wouldn't pay a fee associated.
Correct. Our city ordinances do require everybody that operates a business in the city to obtain a business license. We just are limited now to who we can charge a fee for.
Okay, this is a public. I'm sorry, yes.
Mr. Lentz wanted the state law language. This is how it reads. The city cannot charge a license for a home-based business unless the combined off-site impact of the home-based business and the primary residential use materially exceeds the off-site impact of the primary residential use alone.
And that was just from this most recent legislative session?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to come forward, please limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. Seeing no one's coming forward, we'll close the public comment portion of the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council? Anyone care to make a motion? Okay, Debbie?
I move that we amend Section 12-3-5 of the Orem City Code pertaining to business license duration, Section 12-3-6C pertaining to the proration of application fees, and Sections 12-3-6D of the pertaining to business license late penalties.
I'll second that motion. Councilmember McDonald.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you. We'll move on to number 15, which is a rezone of the Delta 5 Industrial Park. This is amending Section 22-53A and the zoning map of the City of Orem by changing the zone on 3.75 acres at 1519 West, 400 South, from the C2 zone and the R20 zone to the M1 zone. And the presenter is Jake.
Thank you, Mayor. So this property is between the two railroad tracks on 4 South, about approximately 1,500 west. The applicant who actually owns property here would like to add on to their business and actually move over to that site. It's currently zoned.
Jason, I was point applicant owns just north. Okay, thank you.
Right there. So they're wanting to develop this property. The back or the south half is R20, and the north half is C2. They would like to rezone that to M1, which would allow the lighter industrial uses, office warehousing, things like that, which is what they want to develop. You can see on the map to the right, or the left, excuse me, the general plan is M1, light industrial. So their request to rezone it to M1 does match the general plan. This is their future, what they want to do. The front's on 4 South within the next year or so to actually develop that. And then it shows how it'll be future development in the years to come. Any questions that I can address?
So does the railroad play into this in any way, either one of those railroads?
So they will not be impacting the railroad. They do, the railroad did have or the UDOT, excuse me, when there's an access between the tracks or close to the tracks, UDOT actually is charged to make sure that meets the railroad requirements. So this will be reviewed by UDOT, and this location right in the center of the property is what UDOT has approved for this location.
Yeah. Councilor McDonald.
I know Bry's not here. Is this gentleman representing this group? Maybe he should join us, Mr. Mayor, at your presentation, please.
If you could give us your name.
Yes, it's Mark Warner, and I'm working with Bry on the project. I'm actually the owner of the land, so.
Okay. What's on the land right now?
There isn't anything on the land. It's just bare dirt, and Skip Dunn has some old equipment on it.
How long have you owned it?
Over 10 years.
And what was your plan to do with it?
Well, that's why I bought the property in the first place. I also am one of the owners of Collision Safety Engineering, which is the neighboring property.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so now you feel like the time's proper to go ahead and develop it?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor McDonald.
Could you point out some of the adjoining property? I know Mighty Lights in the area. I know the fence companies across the street. Could you kind of give?
It's actually 4th North. This is.
Oh, that's right. This is 4 South. Sorry, no wonder we couldn't find it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So if I
point
may,
out some of the other neighbors, get us acclimated, would you please?
Yes, indeed. So I don't have a pointer.
Just touch this.
Oh, okay. So this is
touch and hold.
Touch and hold. This is Geneva Road and the used to be the Vineyard Garden Center.
Grant Holdaway's place?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't get to see him walking across Geneva Road anymore.
That is still a nursery, and another company has bought it.
Yes.
And they're turning it into a very nice facility.
Yes, Shade, I think is the name of it. North of our property, if I can get this to, there we go. So this is the roofing supply company. And over here are storage units. And this is the new bridge that goes over the railroad.
Yep. Thank you.
So, Jason, could you go back and show us the access to this property? So basically one access road in and that's it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
How many total?
3.75.
And these are going to be like small warehouse type facilities with an office?
Yes, I have some example photographs, but I don't think Jason has them. I can grab them. And
it's okay because we're not doing a site plan here. I'm just
right.
I just wanted to know what it is you're planning on doing. So
that pretty well similar to the other ones in the area. I mean, that's pretty consistent across the street. You got some office warehouse kind of stuff, right?
Yes, although I think these would be a little bit more modern. Certainly, they'll be tilt-up concrete buildings. The other businesses across the street are more of a storage unit and a roofing supply house. So this is, I don't know exactly how to say it other than more modern and a little bit more upscale.
It'd be nice to have this development in the area.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, did you have any more you wanted to say?
Just from the compatibility of the M1 zone, are the ones to the east, are they also in the M1 zone, or are those in what zone are those in?
So most of the property, the darker gray, is the M2.
Okay.
So future plans for this area is to convert a lot of the M2 to the M1, more of a lighter industrial.
Yeah, M1 is gives you the opportunity to be more of a professional office type.
Right, office warehousing. Things
And
like
it still allows for retail?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember McDonald.
My guess is that back half will never really be developed. It'll be someone storing equipment or something. The end of the triangle, correct? The fence compound area?
Actually, this is a concept that Roger Dudley drew, and this future development and fence compound area, those plans are not in place. I don't really know what will work back there. It's a really difficult piece of property. We'll do what we can, but there's no plan to make that into a storage compound, and there's no plans to make this future development building. That was something that Roger put on the plan, and we never took off.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Just for guesstimate, do you know how wide that dotted line is there before the fence compound? Do you have a rough idea?
That's about 250 feet. Are you talking? Well, I don't know if I can touch on this. Are you talking about this line?
Yes, I am, sir.
Yes, I'm going to say between 150 and 250.
Thank you.
Can't see the dimensions.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please come forward and give us your name and hold your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no one's coming forward, we'll close the public comment portion of our public hearing and bring it back to the council. Any other comments? Anyone choose to make a motion? Okay.
Let's see. I would move we amend section 22-5-3A in the zoning map of the city of Orem by changing the zone on the 3.75 acres at 1519 West, 400 South from the C2 and the R20 zone to now be an M1 zone.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember McDonald?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
You bet.
Thank you. Good luck.
We'll now move on to item number 16, which is a public hearing. This is a budget amendment, amending the current fiscal year 2016-17 budget, and our presenter is Brandon.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Come before you tonight to do our final budget amendment of the fiscal year for 16-17. As in prior budget amendments, some of the elements, not necessarily big dollars in this particular amendment, but we have a higher number of them, and that's grant related. Those are marked by any of the items noted as a 1. Also within there is a item number 2, which is noted as a weed and nuisance abatement fund, if you will, to be able to fund those cases where we need some funds in advance to be able to take care of those kind of things that are handled through our nuisance ordinance. Item number 3 noted on there related to our BNC Road Fund, which is the biggest item on there, $868,000, and that's on there because in the past we have had a issue with crossover of purchase orders, since the construction season goes from basically April, May through the summer. And some time ago, long before I was here, we had the funds set aside, and a project came about where they were able to find the funds within the current year, create the purchase order, and then did not do a budget amendment, in essence, to use the funds that already existed. So in many of the years when we have large, and you'll note in the, down here in the bottom section, the reconstruction project, in years where we have large reconstruction projects that cross over years, we don't have the funds available to fund that project, and so it creates a timing problem. And so this amendment, it tries to alleviate that problem in the future, where the money budgeted within the current year budget funds that project instead of it having a crossover from one year to another. Currently, we have approximately $2.5 million in reserves within the B&C Road Fund. So even by doing this amendment, we would still obtain approximately $1.7 million in reserves, which is approximately half the year's worth of the B&C revenues that we receive in a given year. And we as the city feel like that's still an adequate amount of reserves.
And then going forward, you're going to be current year instead of
crossing, yeah,
right.
Using, yeah, so it would be, we wouldn't need to come back for any.
So this is a good change for the future.
Right. So you would only see us come back for this kind of thing in a case where there was an emergency need of some sort or another, where, a road collapse of some kind or something like that, where we had needed the additional funds to be able to cover that particular event. And then the last item, which we've come to you in prior months before, is in relation to the Siemens Energy lease, which is, we just issued the last large request for disbursement. So that interest income on that trust account will, this may be pretty small after this, and may be eliminated here shortly after we take our final drawdown. So it's just recognizing that interest that's been earned on those funds that are sitting in that trust account. I mentioned in the pre-meeting the highlighted item on here that was added just yesterday as we received word that we had received an EMS grant. So that just the only reason I highlighted it is because it was not in the information that was sent to you last week, and so I just wanted to make sure that you were made aware of that difference. Are there any questions related to these budget amendments?
Any questions by the council? Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to come forward and make a comment, please do so. Seeing no one's coming forward, we'll close the public comment of our public hearing, bring it back to the council. Any comments or questions from the council? Anyone like to make a motion?
Mayor, I move that we amend the current fiscal year 2016-2017 budget, and by ordinance amend fiscal year 2016-2017 budget.
Second.
Is there a second?
Is that to approve it or to hold a public hearing?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Let me amend that. I move that we amend fiscal year 2016-2017 budget as outlined. Thank you.
Second still holds.
Okay. Councilmember Seastrand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are we approving this?
Aye.
Holding a public hearing?
No, we're approving.
Aye.
We just finished the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The ordinance passes, and we'll now move on. Are there any communication items, Jamie?
No, sir.
Okay. So I would accept a motion to adjourn to a closed-door meeting in room 107 for a city manager evaluation.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. We're adjourned.
Tom, thanks for keeping honest there.
It's a full-time job, Sam.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Putting together from one area. Okay. I'm not going to.
You got nothing on me, candidate.